Croeso. This is James, aka JP Harker, coming to you with another tag video today. This is another one that I saw on Kat from Brews and Reviews' channel, and it is the Hazbin Hotel Songs book tag. It is not a series of songs with which I am familiar, but I do intend to have a look when I can. But I liked the look of her video. I will put the link below, and it's an interesting little thing to look at some of the books one has read and associating them. So the first one is number 1, Happy Day in Hell. Name a relentlessly positive or sunshine character. Now, I'm not sure if you'd call him Sunshine, but Gunner First Class Ferric Jürgen of Caiaphas Cain is relentlessly positive. For them as don't know, I've gushed about the Cain books before. Cain is despite what he would claim, an heroic officer, and a political officer, a commissar, and he goes on these various terrible missions that he finds himself embroiled in and what have you. And he has a sidekick in the form of his aide, Gunner Jürgen, or Jürgen. And Gunner Jürgen just has no imagination and has almost no concept of danger. It's not that he has no fear and therefore no courage. We do see a short story from his point of view once, and he's just a very simple man. But he has such utmost faith and trust in our boy Caiaphas that he always assumes it'll all be alright. Caiaphas will be terrified of the situation, and Jürgen will be, "So, what do we do then, sir?" And I like that. He's, I say, not a sunshine character, but a brilliantly positive character because he makes Cain better. Because Jürgen believes that Cain will sort things out. He starts to think, I can sort these things out, and it's good. He's not relentlessly irritating. His positivity is actually quite useful. So that's question 1. I should have planned better where to put these. Question 2. Hell is forever, whether you like it or not. Name a character who's done something so heinous, / a book where something so heinous has happened that you can't forgive them. This took no effort. I don't have the book, and if I did, I would burn it, and that is Desert Spear. I can't even remember the name of the author. He's the same bloke who did The Painted Man. And I absolutely detest that book. I think I gave it 2 stars for world building, but the principal character in Desert Spear is someone who actively encourages I'll say sort of unwelcome intimate assault, because YouTube has issues with certain terminology. But he sent his armies into cities and to occupy provinces, and the wives of the various people there are free game for anyone. And that's something that villains do. This guy, Jadir I think his name is, we're supposed to sympathise with him because he got beaten up as a kid. And I couldn't help but think, good. I'm glad you spent most of your life getting beaten up, because you're encouraging the murder of prisoners, you're encouraging the theft and looting and this assault, and you're acting as if it's perfectly normal and acceptable, and we're supposed to sympathise with you. Now the author, it's Brett something, I honestly can't remember. He has this odd issue with this kind of assault, and it's in his books in a slightly unsettling way already. Now, the argument can be made, should this kind of assault ever be in any book? And I think, well, it's a terrible dark side of humanity. Yes, it should be included in literature, provided it is dealt with in a way that addresses the trauma that's involved and the fact that it is definitely never justifiable. that doesn't seem to have occurred to this guy, and he just throws it in because. And I really disliked that, and it was only because I wanted to slag the book off for being so dreadful that I made myself finish it. And, I don't like criticizing a book I haven't finished, so I forced myself to finish it, and, as I say, if I had it here, I would burn it. So, The Desert Spear. Do not read it. Question 3. Gonna raise the tone a little bit, keep it light. Question 3. Stay gone, it's been 7 years. Tell me about a book where it feels like you've been waiting 7 years for it. We all know about Winds of Winter / Dream of Spring. We all know George is probably never going to finish the series. We all know that it's been, 11 years since Dance of Dragons, and he's written himself into a corner. And I can understand that it's difficult when you've made your story so large and spread it out so much that writing a satisfying conclusion is going to be difficult. Side note, I'm currently working on the 6th book of the Caledon Saga. Those books started off with maybe 3 POV characters per book, and that's built up to 6 to 8 until now. As I'm working on the final books, there are, I think, 14 or 15 POVs. That's a lot. It's a lot to keep track of. It's a lot to try and give everybody some development, give everybody something interesting to do, have a satisfying conclusion both to story and to character. That's difficult. I appreciate that. But he's had a decade of this, and he's a better writer than I am, so George, come on. The other one I've noted down, enough people rant about Winds of Winter. The other one I've noted down is Hell's Bells and Empty Night and Stars and Stones, which is going to be the climax of the Dresden Files. We waited a long time for the last couple to come along, Peace Talks and Battleground, and some hit and miss stuff. It's a controversial topic. I enjoyed a lot of it, and I was irritated by a lot of it. I won't go into that now. It wasn't... The good outweighed the bad, because I still want to see what happens next. But part of me is worried that what happens next will continue this downward trend, because the Dresden books have been getting better and better and better and better, and now we're plateauing, and I worry that it may drop. I don't know, but I would still like to read them. And Jim Butcher is taking his time. So that's those two. Question number 4. Respectless, your long past credit. Name a book that you love, but that seems to be out of trend and nobody seems to talk about. Right. Everyone loves Chronicles of Narnia. Everyone bangs on about this. Everyone seems to think that Lion, Witch and Wardrobe is the best of them. It isn't. And people talk about the interesting religious allegory that exists in Lion, Witch and Wardrobe and Magician's Nephew and Last Battle specifically. I enjoy all of those. I enjoy Prince Caspian. I enjoy The Silver Chair. I enjoy Voyage of the Dawn Treader. I really like The Horse and His Boy. Everyone seems to think it's the weakest of them. Everyone says it's the one you can skip. I love Horse and His Boy. I think it's fantastic. Partly because, and I didn't make this connection until after I'd read it a few times and decided I loved it. Partly because it's the one that features children from our world the least. It happens during the golden age of Narnia when Peter, Susan, Edmund, Lucy are already adult kings. And it takes place outside of Narnia, in Culloden. So it's completely separated from our usual format of the children from our world are brought into Narnia and have to help out with some great issue. I know they weren't in Narnia when they got to Dawn Treader, but you know what I mean. This is separate, and it's more like high fantasy because we're not looking at it through the perspective of people from our world. We're seeing it from the perspective of people who live permanently in this world. And that makes it more absorbing. And the fact that we're in a completely different culture, that makes it absorbing. And the fact that the characters, both Shasta and Aravis, are so flawed, that makes it more absorbing. And it makes it a better book. And to all those people who say, oh, Narnia's the best, don't read Horse and His Boy, no. Read Horse and His Boy, it's good. My favourite. I'm piling these somewhere very unsensible. I may have to start putting them over there. Right, question number 5. Poison. I know it's poison, you're feeding me poison. Name a guilty pleasure / a book that's not written, but you love it and go back to it. Not best written, sorry. I know, it's nonsense. Alright, the martial art of ninjutsu is not nonsense. The Takamatsu-den style, so to speak, at its core is an excellent martial art and has an awful lot of good application. I strongly recommend you cross-train in things like jiu-jitsu and karate, but it's a good martial art, and it's got lots of interesting things to talk about, and I've spent many happy hours making throwing blades and practicing how to throw them and making Metsubushi devices and going out in the woods and doing stealth and all of that malarkey you do when you're a ninjutsu student in your early 20s. I'm not in my early 20s anymore. But I'm using this as an example, Hatsumi's books in general, they're not especially well written. They are supposedly philosophizing, and they're not. They've gone through the filter of people like Stephen K. Hayes. But Hatsumi Sensei, he writes an awful lot of waffle. And though he himself and his top students are very proficient martial artists, a lot of other people aren't. And Mr. Hatsumi doesn't care that a lot of people are using his martial art and don't know anything and are rubbish. He doesn't care. And he writes all this nonsense and doesn't care. And I know he doesn't care, and I know so much of it is nonsense, but I can't help it. It reminds me of a simpler time, when I was a little bit more innocent about how these things really worked. And when I thought there was such a thing as people one could idolize. And there aren't. But books like this I do sometimes like to have a look back at. There we go. Little guilty pleasure. History and Tradition is another one, but I couldn't find that one. Right, that'll be the next one on my list. Number 6, Loser Baby. We're all living in the same shit sandwich. Name a book with a setting or plot that's just terrible for everyone. I read 40k books. Need I say more? I'll just wave one at random. It's a dreadful universe to live in. Everyone is miserable all of the time. There is extreme religious fanaticism. There's genetic mutation. There is the threat of alien invasion. There's the threat of chaos incursion through another dimension or through a fleet. There's the threat of the Tyranid menace obliterating the galaxy. There's just everything is rubbish, and even if you're living in a reasonably safe part of the Imperium of Man, you have no freedom, and you are kept in a perpetual state of frightened ignorance, and there is no hope of any kind. 40k? That's my advert for that. It's the ultimate dystopia. Right, number 7. Hell's Greatest Dad. It's a little funny, you could almost call me Dad. Name a favourite father or father-like figure. This one, Kat may or may not approve. The Moidart. And yes, you do have to do it in the voice, because the Regante are quite clearly the Scots, and the Moidart is quite clearly some version of Edward I, but in a 17th century setting. And he's a nightmarishly awful person in the way that he brutally suppresses the good guys who are the tribes. But in this book especially, Storm Rider is the fourth book in the Regante series. In the third book, the Moidart is a villain. Plain and simple, he is the enemy. In this, you see that he's a dreadful, dreadful human being, but he does care for his boy, and he will put the welfare of his son above his own well-being and above his own best interests. He's described as being selfish and power-hungry in the other books, and we see that, yeah, he's an awful guy, but he's also an artist, and he's also a father. And that little bit of complexity that we got for him made him so likeable. And it's like when Darth Vader turns on the Emperor. When someone who frightens you turns on someone who is worse, you can't help but cheer. So, Storm Rider by David Gemmell, The Moidart. This pile is going to fall over. Question number 8. You didn't know, what are we even talking about? Name a book that you read and can't remember anything about. I can think of 2 off the top of my head. Huckleberry Finn and My Man Jeeves. I know I've read them. I even put a review for them. I remember nothing. In Huckleberry Finn, there's a boat at some point, and they hide somewhere. And you think he's going to betray someone and doesn't. But that's it. And My Man Jeeves, no clue. I know it's some short stories, and at one point they're having to babysit. That's it. Not memorable books at all. Either that or I'm just getting old. Question number 9. Out for love. You'll only stand a chance if you're out for love. Name a character who would do anything for love. Meatloaf. But apart from that, I chose one and I thought not romantic love. From George R.R. Martin's A Game of Thrones, the legend that is Ned Stark. Because all through the book, we're being given this idea that he places honour above all else. And there can be an argument that placing your personal honour above all else is a form of selfishness. Because it can be argued it's one of the things that lost Corbyn his election. He was so concerned with showing what a good man he was and all this integrity he had, he was not very good at spin doctoring and at answering questions in a way the audience wanted to hear. He was too busy being a paragon, and that is a form of selfishness. And Ned Stark, you almost think that until you realise he's doing everything purely for his family, not for the abstract concept of honour. And especially near the end, spoilers, the whole world knows about it. He was played by Sean Bean, for goodness sake. When he is willing to sacrifice himself, he sacrifices his honour first. And it's not... He knows that it won't do the country any good for him to confess like this. But he does it for the sake of his children. And that is somebody putting his own reputation, his own honour, and even his own responsibilities to his country and his lordship. He's putting all of those aside for the sake of love. And I thought that, given the Honourable Ned Stark myth that surrounds his name, No, he's the most emotionally vulnerable and emotionally devoted character in the book, I think. And yes, he does do anything for love. He gives up everything that he has and everything that he is for even the smallest chance that it might save his children. And I think that is wonderful. I criticize George Martin all the time. I criticize some of the things in his books, but he writes some brilliant stuff. He really does. I think that's a very inspiring thing. I'm not going to pile this on there. It's going to fall over if I do. I'm putting it there. The last question, and I've done a bit of ranting, so I won't rant this time as well. Ready for this. Have you ever wanted something that was so clear in your mind that you can taste it? You mean like the taste of human flesh? I do need to listen to these songs, I appreciate. I haven't got round to it. I'm a busy man, I have a job and a child. It's hard to juggle stuff as it is, but I will get round to it. I will. Name a weird book, whether you like it or not. John dies at the end. I did have this in paperback, I've given it away. It's a book, I can't remember the author, I'm afraid, that I think was turned into a film. John Dies at the End is this very strange, abstract, existential threat that we don't really understand, but that isn't taken that seriously. Two best friends in America travelling round and getting in trouble. It's trying so hard to be Douglas Adams. And there are some moments in there that are genuinely clever, and there are some moments in there that are genuinely funny. But I spent so much of it thinking, this makes no sense, and not in a fun way, and this is trying to be Douglas Adams, but in America. And it just didn't work. And it was weird, and not in a good way. That's my humble opinion. All of these are my humble opinion, of course, and if it was really humble, I wouldn't be sharing it with the internet, but there we go. I'll call it humble. Right, so that was the Hazbin Hotel Songs book tag. Thank you, Kat. I will, honest. Time, man, time. That's enough ranting about books for now, I think, so I shall leave it at that. Thanks for watching. This was James, aka JP Harker. Bilbao.